Imagine having everything the world says you should want. Millions of dollars in the bank, luxury cars, and a penthouse overlooking a breathtaking skyline. But what if all that wealth became a curse? What if every smile you received was bought, and every touch was just a calculated transaction? This is the story of a man who decided to strip away his entire identity, risking everything to find out if someone could love him for who he truly was. But deception, even with the best intentions, always has a price. Get ready for a tense, emotional journey about love, betrayal, and the harsh truth that money can complicate everything. Liam Thorne was not your average 29-year-old. Born into a wealthy Chicago real estate family, he had refused to coast on his father's money. Instead, he channeled his relentless ambition into the tech industry, building a software empire that made him financially invincible before he even turned 30. His parents were endlessly proud, but his success came with a heavy emotional toll. Liam was a handsome man, and his wealth only magnified his appeal. However, he quickly learned that the women flocking to him were mesmerized by his Porsche and his gold Patek Philippe watch, not his heart. After years of shallow relationships and gold diggers, a bitter disillusionment had poisoned his soul. He was desperately lonely, craving a genuine connection in a city full of perfectly rehearsed illusions. The stage was set for a radical experiment, one that would force him to question everything he knew about trust. The neon lights of the Chicago skyline bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Liam's penthouse, casting long, lonely shadows across the imported Italian marble floor. He stood alone in the dark, gripping a crystal glass of aged bourbon, feeling an unbearable weight pressing down on his chest. He was utterly exhausted by the superficiality of his existence. Every woman who smiled at him recently seemed to be calculating his net worth, their eyes darting to his expensive accessories before ever looking into his soul. It was a suffocating reality where genuine human connection was replaced by silent, ruthless transactions. He took a slow sip of the burning liquid, feeling the warmth spread through his chest, but it did nothing to melt the cold isolation he felt. The city below buzzed with millions of people, yet Liam had never felt more entirely alone in his entire life. He desperately needed to find someone who would look at him and see a man, not a walking ATM. Later that night, Liam found himself in an exclusive VIP lounge in the Gold Coast district, surrounded by pulsating bass and flashing strobe lights. He wore a custom-tailored suit that practically screamed wealth, a reluctant uniform for the world he inhabited. Almost immediately, a stunning blonde woman slid into the leather booth beside him, her perfume thick and overpowering. She didn't ask about his day or his interests. Instead, her manicured fingers grazed the bezel of his luxury watch, and she purred a compliment about his obvious success. Liam felt a familiar wave of nausea wash over him. He politely but firmly removed her hand, offered a cold smile, and excused himself from the table. He wandered toward the quieter side of the bar, his jaw clenched in frustration. The heavy bass of the club felt like a headache creeping into his skull. He was tired of the game, tired of the fake laughter, and tired of being a target for opportunistic predators. Just as Liam was about to signal the bartender for his check and abandon the miserable evening, he noticed a woman sitting alone at the far end of the mahogany bar. She was dressed simply, sipping a clear drink with a bored expression on her face. Intrigued by her lack of pretense, Liam walked over and offered a polite greeting. He leaned against the counter, intentionally letting the cuff of his shirt pull back to reveal his gold watch, a cynical test he had grown accustomed to performing. He offered to buy her next round, expecting the usual enthusiastic agreement. To his utter shock, the woman merely glanced at him, shrugged, and politely declined. She pointed to her half-full glass, stating she already had what she needed. Liam blinked, genuinely caught off guard. This was completely off script. The blatant display of his wealth had not moved her in the slightest, and for the first time in years, Liam felt a genuine spark of curiosity ignite within his tired heart. Her name was Chloe. Liam spent the next hour talking to her, fascinated by her grounded demeanour. She didn't ask what he did for a living, nor did she care about the VIP section he had access to. When the night started winding down, Liam naturally assumed she would want to leave with him, a pattern he had grown depressingly used to. Instead, Chloe checked a very ordinary, inexpensive watch on her wrist and announced that she needed to head home. Desperate to keep the rare connection alive, Liam suggested they take a drive around the city in his luxury car. Chloe politely declined again, stating she was tired, but she did agree to exchange phone numbers. As Liam watched her walk out into the cool Chicago night, a strange, unfamiliar sensation blossomed in his chest. It was hope. He drove his sleek car back to his empty penthouse, his mind racing with possibilities. Could this girl actually be the genuine soul he had been searching for all these agonizing years? The next evening, Liam met his father, Richard, at an old money steakhouse downtown. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meat and expensive cigars. Liam poured his heart out, expressing his deep frustrations with modern dating and the endless parade of women who only loved his wallet. Richard, a seasoned businessman, with silver hair and a sharp gaze, chuckled deeply, cutting into his rare steak. He leaned across the white tablecloth and revealed a family secret. Back in the 90s, before he married Liam's mother, Richard had staged a massive financial ruin. He lied, claiming his business had collapsed and he was drowning in debt. He wanted to see if she would stay when the money was gone. To his amazement, she didn't run. Instead, she gathered her own modest jewellery to sell at a pawn shop to help him. Richard told his son that it was a dangerous, terrifying test, but it proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had found a truly loyal woman. Liam listened to his father's story with wide eyes, the clinking of silverware fading into the background. It was a chaotic, manipulative tactic, but the raw effectiveness of it resonated deeply within him. Richard took a slow sip of red wine and challenged his son to try a similar experiment. He told Liam that if he wanted the truth, he had to strip away the gold plating and present himself as nothing. Liam hesitated, his logical mind fighting against the emotional appeal of the idea. It felt like crossing a dangerous moral line. He told his father he would keep the idea as a last resort, still holding out hope that his new acquaintance, Chloe, might prove that such drastic measures weren't necessary. He wanted to believe that Chloe was different, that her indifference at the club wasn't just an act. The seed of deception had been planted in his mind, but for now, Liam chose to focus on the promising reality of his upcoming dates. Over the next few weeks, Liam and Chloe continued to see each other. Determined to test her subtly, Liam picked her up for their first official date in his top-tier luxury vehicle. He watched her reaction closely, waiting for her eyes to widen or for the greedy questions to start. But Chloe barely registered the expensive leather interior. When he asked where she wanted to go, fully expecting her to name a high-end restaurant, she casually suggested grabbing some cheap bread and heading to Lincoln Park to feed the ducks. Liam was so stunned, he almost hit the brakes in the middle of traffic. He couldn't believe it. He had spent years shelling out thousands of dollars for extravagant dinners, and this beautiful woman just wanted to sit by a pond. As they sat on a wooden bench watching the ducks glide across the murky water, Liam felt a profound sense of peace. He began to believe that he had finally found the unicorn of the dating world. However, behind the scenes, a completely different reality was unfolding. Chloe was not the selfless angel Liam imagined. She was simply a pragmatic woman who enjoyed a drama-free life. One afternoon, she met her best friend Harper at a small, independent coffee shop in Wicker Park. The air was rich with the scent of roasted espresso and warm pastries. Harper was a psychology graduate student, fiercely intelligent and deeply principled. As they sipped their lattes, Chloe casually mentioned that the new guy she was seeing was incredibly wealthy. She detailed his luxury car, his penthouse, and his gold watch. Harper smiled, genuinely happy for her friend, and asked how the romance was developing. Chloe let out a long, heavy sigh, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. She dropped a bombshell that made Harper freeze. Chloe confessed that she wasn't attracted to Liam at all. He wasn't her type, and she felt absolutely no romantic spark when they were together. Harper gripped her ceramic mug, the heat radiating into her palms as she stared at Chloe with absolute disbelief. The bustling noise of the coffee shop faded as the weight of Chloe's confession hung heavily in the air. She could not comprehend how her friend could string a man along simply because he provided a comfortable lifestyle. Chloe tried to defend herself, arguing that she never actually asked him for anything. She pointed out that she rejected his expensive gifts and only requested cheap dates, so she wasn't technically doing anything wrong. But Harper leaned across the small wooden table, her voice dropping to a harsh, stern whisper. She explained that leading someone on when you have no real feelings for them is not just unfair, it is emotionally destructive. She painted a vivid picture of a future built on lies, warning Chloe that trapping a man in a one-sided relationship would eventually shatter his heart completely. Harper's words pierced through Chloe's rationalizations like a sharp knife. The psychology student reminded her friend of a past scandal at their university, where a small lie had spiraled into a massive disaster. She demanded that Chloe look deep into her own conscience and do the right thing. The truth always surfaces eventually, Harper warned, and the longer the lie goes on, the more devastating the collateral damage will be. Chloe stared down at her half-empty coffee, a heavy knot of guilt forming in her stomach. She knew Harper was absolutely right. The luxurious safety net Liam provided was not worth the crushing karma of breaking a good man's heart. It was a harsh dose of reality, but it was exactly what Chloe needed to hear. With a heavy sigh of resignation, Chloe agreed. She promised Harper that she would meet with Liam the very next day and end the relationship, setting him free before his feelings grew any deeper. The following afternoon, the Chicago sky was overcast, reflecting the heavy mood settling over the city. Liam arrived at the park holding a massive, expensive bouquet of deep red roses. He walked toward Chloe with a bright, hopeful smile, completely unaware of the impending devastation. Chloe's heart sank as she accepted the beautiful flowers. She briefly considered backing out, tempted by the easy life he could offer, but Harper's stern warnings echoed loudly in her mind. She took a deep, shaky breath, bracing herself for the emotional impact. Looking into his kind, trusting eyes made the task 100 times harder. She started speaking softly, telling him what a wonderful, generous man he was. Liam's smile began to falter, sensing the terrible shift in the atmosphere. The cold wind whipped off Lake Michigan as Chloe finally forced the painful words out of her mouth. She told him that despite his perfection, he simply wasn't her type, and they had to end things immediately. Liam felt as though the solid ground had been violently pulled out from under his feet. His shoulders slumped, and the vibrant light vanished from his eyes. He had been so sure that he had finally found the right person, someone immune to the toxic lure of his money. Chloe felt a sharp pang of intense pity watching the confident millionaire crumble into a state of profound vulnerability. Trying to soften the blow, she offered a gentle smile and suggested they could remain friends. Liam let out a hollow, bitter laugh, shaking his head slowly. He confessed that she was the very first woman who hadn't demanded his money, and losing her felt like losing his last shred of hope in humanity. Before she walked away, Chloe pointed to the small duck pond nearby. She told him to treat this spot as his talisman, a lake of truth. She advised him that when he finally met the woman destined for him, he should bring her here. With that, she turned and left him standing alone in the cold. The breakup triggered a massive downward spiral for Liam. For 2 agonizing months, he barely left his sprawling downtown penthouse. The luxurious apartment, once a symbol of his incredible success, transformed into a dark, suffocating prison. Empty pizza boxes piled up on the marble counters, and the heavy blackout curtains remained tightly drawn against the Chicago sunlight. He ignored his business emails, letting his lieutenants run the company. He spent his days staring blankly at video games, completely detached from reality. He stopped shaving, letting a thick, unkempt beard grow over his jawline. His father, Richard, tried multiple times to pull him out of the abyss, inviting him to family dinners and weekend fishing trips, but Liam rejected every offer. The betrayal of his own expectations had left him hollow. He felt that if a woman who didn't even care about money didn't want him, then he was fundamentally unlovable as a human being. Unable to watch his son rot away, Richard finally took matters into his own hands. He used his emergency key to enter the penthouse, wrinkling his nose at the stale, heavy air that greeted him. He marched into the living room and threw open the curtains, flooding the dark room with blinding light. Liam groaned, shielding his eyes from the sudden assault. Richard stood over him, a stern, commanding presence. He bluntly told Liam that he looked like an absolute disaster, completely unfit for a man of his stature and business acumen. But beneath the harsh criticism, Richard's voice softened with genuine paternal concern. He told his son that despair was a useless emotion. It was time to stop feeling sorry for himself and take drastic action. Richard reminded him of the strategy they had discussed weeks ago. If Liam truly believed his wealth was the barrier to finding authentic love, it was time to eliminate the wealth from the equation. It was time to become a ghost. The idea, which had once seemed foolish, now felt like the only logical path forward. Liam had nothing left to lose. He walked into his massive walk-in closet and bypassed the rows of designer suits and expensive leather shoes. Deep in the back, he found an old, faded grey hoodie and a pair of worn-out jeans from his college days. He took off his gold Patek Philippe, placing it carefully in a velvet drawer, feeling a strange sense of liberation as the heavy metal left his wrist. He looked in the mirror at his wild hair and thick beard. He didn't look like a tech millionaire. He looked like a guy struggling to make next month's rent. Leaving his wallet and car keys behind, he grabbed a few crumpled dollar bills and walked out of the luxury building. For the first time in almost a decade, Liam Thorne was going to take the CTA train. He was stepping out of his ivory tower and plunging directly into the messy, unfiltered reality of the city. The rattle and screech of the L train was deafening, a harsh contrast to the silent, climate-controlled cabin of his Porsche. Liam sat on the hard plastic seat, surrounded by exhausted commuters, college students, and street musicians. The smell of old coffee and wet concrete permeated the air. To his absolute surprise, he didn't hate it. In fact, he felt a thrilling surge of adrenaline. Nobody was looking at him. Nobody was evaluating his worth. He was completely invisible, a nameless face in the urban sea. When he finally stepped off the train near the lakefront, the cool breeze off Lake Michigan hit his face, filling his lungs with fresh, unbreathed air. He felt more alive than he had in months. He walked toward the sprawling green expanse of the park, intending to find a quiet bench and just exist in the sunlight. He was ready to let the universe dictate his next move, completely free from the heavy burden of his massive fortune. As Liam strolled along the paved trail, the peaceful ambience of the late afternoon was suddenly shattered. The sound of aggressive, raised voices drifted over the sound of the crashing waves. Liam paused, his senses immediately on high alert. He peered through a cluster of oak trees and saw a young woman in athletic running gear backed against a stone retaining wall. Two large, heavily intoxicated men were blocking her path, their body language predatory and menacing. The woman was glancing around frantically, her eyes wide with rising panic as the men mocked her attempts to leave. The thick stench of cheap beer wafted through the air. Without a single second of hesitation, a protective rage flared to life inside Liam's chest. He didn't care that he was dressed like a vagrant. His instincts took over completely. He stepped off the path and marched directly toward the escalating confrontation, his muscles tensed and ready for violence if necessary. Liam inserted himself between the terrified woman and the two drunk antagonists, his presence sudden and commanding. He squared his shoulders, using his height to his advantage, and demanded to know exactly what was going on. The two men blinked, startled by the unexpected interference. One of them sneered, looking Liam up and down, mocking his ragged hoodie and wild beard. He slurred a nasty comment, assuming Liam was just a homeless drifter looking for a fight. But Liam didn't flinch. He locked eyes with the louder of the two, his gaze burning with the cold, absolute authority of a man used to destroying rivals in corporate boardrooms. He dropped his voice to a low, dangerous gravel, giving them exactly 3 seconds to turn around and walk away before things got ugly. The sheer terrifying confidence radiating from Liam was enough to sober the men up slightly. Muttering curses under their breath, they finally backed off and stumbled away down the trail. The silence that followed was heavy with adrenaline. The young woman let out a long, shaky exhale, her shoulders dropping in immense relief. She turned to Liam, her face flushed from the scare, and offered a genuine, luminous smile. She thanked him profusely, her voice trembling slightly, but full of sincere gratitude. Liam looked down at her and felt an electric jolt shoot straight through his heart. She had bright, intelligent eyes and a natural beauty that required no expensive makeup. He brushed off his heroics with a modest chuckle, suggesting that she should probably bring a bodyguard on her evening runs. The woman laughed, a musical sound that made Liam's chest tight. She introduced herself as Harper. Liam offered his name, omitting his last name out of necessity. When Harper boldly suggested that he could be her running partner to keep the creeps away, Liam couldn't believe his luck. He eagerly agreed, pulling a pen from his pocket to write her number directly onto his palm. That chance encounter completely altered the trajectory of Liam's life. He and Harper began meeting 3 times a week for morning runs along the lakefront. The brutal Chicago mornings with their biting winds and pale sunrises became the highlight of his existence. As they pounded the pavement side by side, their lungs burning, they talked about everything. Harper revealed she was finishing her psychology degree and working at a community centre. Liam listened to her speak with fierce passion about helping others, utterly captivated by her selfless nature. He played his role perfectly, claiming he was just a regular guy figuring his life out. Harper didn't care about his lack of a prestigious career or his thrift store clothes. She cared about his thoughts, his sense of humour, and the way he listened to her. Liam realised with absolute certainty that this was the real deal. He was falling deeply, irrevocably in love, and it had absolutely nothing to do with his bank account. After several weeks of building a profound emotional connection, Liam decided it was time to take Harper on a proper date. Remembering the parting advice from his ex, Chloe, he asked Harper if she would like to go feed the ducks at the pond in Lincoln Park. Harper's face lit up with joy, completely thrilled by the simple, inexpensive suggestion. They walked to the Lake of Truth, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the water. They bought 2 cheap loaves of bread and stood side by side, tossing crumbs to the eager birds. The atmosphere was charged with a heavy, romantic tension. Liam looked at Harper, the wind catching her hair, and felt his heart hammering wildly against his ribs. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to confess his love, but he was paralysed by the fear of how to navigate the massive lie he had built. He stared at her profile, utterly mesmerised, completely forgetting about the world around them. Harper turned her head, catching his intense gaze. A soft, knowing smile touched her lips. She stepped closer, the space between them evaporating. With the sharp intuition of a psychologist, she whispered that she knew exactly what he was trying to figure out. Liam held his breath, terrified she had somehow uncovered his secret identity. But instead, Harper reached up, gently tracing the line of his bearded jaw, and softly confessed that she was falling for him too. The relief and joy that exploded within Liam were overwhelming. He leaned down, bridging the final gap, and kissed her. It wasn't the practiced, shallow kiss of his past relationships. It was desperate, raw, and full of raw emotion. In that single moment, every doubt and fear Liam ever harboured about love was completely vaporised. He had found his soulmate as a poor, nameless man. But a dark shadow lurked behind the sunlight. He now faced the terrifying reality of telling her the truth. The following weekend, Harper excitedly called Liam to finalise plans for their Saturday night date. Liam, riding the high of their new romance, assumed he would finally take her to a nice restaurant and begin easing her into his real life. But Harper proudly announced that she had already booked tickets for an independent movie and insisted that it was her turn to pay. She wanted to treat him, explaining with a laugh that she was a strong, independent woman who didn't need a man to buy her popcorn. Liam chuckled, his heart swelling with affection, but a knot of anxiety twisted in his gut. Her fierce independence and insistence on equality were beautiful, but they also highlighted how deeply she valued honesty and humility. As he hung up the phone, Liam made a firm decision. The disguise had served its purpose. He had found pure love. It was time to shed the fake skin, reveal his true self, and pray that their bond was strong enough to survive the shock. On the evening of the date, Liam showered, shaved off the ragged beard, and styled his hair. He walked into his closet and bypassed the casual clothes, pulling out a sharp, tailored navy suit. He strapped the heavy gold Patek Philippe back onto his wrist, feeling the familiar weight of his reality settle over him. He grabbed the keys to his sleek black Porsche 911 and headed down to the private garage. As the powerful engine roared to life, Liam's hands gripped the leather steering wheel tightly. He was a nervous wreck. He planned to drive to Harper's modest apartment, sit her down in the car, and explain everything. He would tell her about his past trauma with women, his desperate need for truth, and how she was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. He desperately hoped she would understand the extreme measures he had taken. He pulled out onto the busy Chicago streets, speeding toward what he hoped would be the beginning of the rest of his life. Meanwhile, Harper was standing in her small bedroom, adjusting her favorite dress in the mirror. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Chloe. They hadn't spoken properly in weeks. Harper answered with a bright smile, eager to share the news about her new boyfriend. She described Liam with glowing enthusiasm, telling Chloe about his kindness, his protective nature, and how he worked a modest job but had a heart of gold. On the other end of the line, Chloe listened, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over her. She asked for his name. When Harper said, "Liam," Chloe froze. She rapidly fired off questions about his appearance and behaviour. As Harper described him, Chloe's heart sank. She remembered Liam's wealthy background and his strange behaviour. With a hesitant, shaking voice, Chloe asked Harper if this Liam had recently grown a beard and if he ever talked about a lake of truth. Harper's smile vanished completely. The blood drained from her face as the horrific realization set in. Before Harper could process the devastating phone call, she heard the low, aggressive purr of a high-performance engine outside her window. She walked over to the glass and looked down at the street. A gleaming black Porsche 911 was idling at the curb. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was clean-shaven, dressed in an immaculate, expensive suit, looking like a billionaire out of a magazine. It was Liam. Harper's breath caught in her throat. The pieces of the puzzle violently slammed together in her mind. This wasn't a poor, struggling guy. This was the obscenely wealthy, deceptive ex-boyfriend her best friend had dumped months ago. The man she had opened her heart to, the man she thought was pure and honest, had been playing a sick, manipulative game with her from the very beginning. A suffocating wave of betrayal crashed over her, turning her love into sharp, agonizing anger. She grabbed her coat and marched out of the apartment, ready for a war. Liam stood by the Porsche, a hopeful smile on his face as he saw Harper emerge from the building, but as she marched toward him, the fury in her eyes was unmistakable. She didn't look at the car. She glared straight through him. Liam's stomach plummeted. He reached out, stammering her name, but she slapped his hand away. With a voice trembling with rage, she pointed at the luxury vehicle and demanded an explanation. Desperate, Liam began spilling the truth, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. He confessed his identity, his wealth, and his pathetic fear of gold diggers. He pleaded with her to understand that he only lied because he wanted to be loved for his soul. But Harper raised her hand, silencing him instantly. She told him that she knew exactly who he was, that she was Chloe's best friend. Liam's face went pale with absolute shock. Harper stared at him with cold disgust, stating that she could never build a life with a man whose foundation was made of lies. Harper turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Liam utterly devastated on the sidewalk. For days he bombarded her with calls and texts, but she blocked his number. He even drove to the community centre, but she refused to see him. Liam was drowning in a despair far worse than before. He had finally found the perfect woman, and his own paranoia had destroyed it. Out of sheer desperation, he scoured his contacts and found Chloe's number. He called his ex-girlfriend, swallowing every ounce of his pride. When Chloe answered, Liam practically begged. He admitted he was a fool, a paranoid idiot who ruined the best thing in his life. He pleaded with Chloe to intervene, to talk to Harper and convince her that his heart was truly in the right place. Chloe listened to the broken millionaire, feeling a surprising pang of sympathy. She knew how rigid Harper could be with her morals, but she also knew how deeply Harper loved him. With a sigh, Chloe agreed to help, but warned him it would not be easy. For 2 agonizing weeks, Liam lived in purgatory, waiting for a miracle. He sat in his penthouse, staring at the silent phone, regretting every decision that led him to this miserable isolation. Just as he was about to give up entirely, the screen lit up with an incoming call from Harper. He snatched the phone so fast he almost dropped it. When he answered, Harper's voice was firm, but the anger had softened. She told him that Chloe had advocated for him endlessly, explaining the severe depth of his trust issues. Harper took a deep breath and delivered her verdict. She told Liam she would forgive him, but it was a one-time offer, bound by strict conditions. First, he was never allowed to lie to her about anything ever again, no matter how small. Second, as a penalty for the emotional turmoil, he had to buy Chloe the newest iPhone, pay for a year of elite Pilates classes, and fund a massive shopping spree on the Magnificent Mile. Liam burst into a fit of hysterical, relieved laughter. Liam agreed to every single demand without a second thought. He swore on his life that the deception was forever buried. He told her he would empty his bank accounts right now if it meant seeing her smile again. Harper's tough facade finally cracked, and a soft, genuine laugh escaped her lips. She told him to save his money, but ordered him to meet her at the movie theatre in exactly 1 hour. She warned him to leave the Porsche at home and take the train. Liam hung up the phone, a massive, brilliant smile breaking across his face. He threw off his suit jacket, grabbed his old hoodie, and sprinted out the door. The disguise was gone, but the humility remained. He had played a dangerous game with fate, lost everything, and miraculously won it back. As he ran toward the L train, the Chicago wind felt warmer. The city looked brighter, and for the first time in his life, Liam Thorne knew exactly what it meant to be truly, undeniably rich. The climax of Liam's grand deception proved that no amount of money can protect you from the consequences of a lie. The plot twist of Harper being Chloe's best friend shattered Liam's illusion of control, forcing him to face the very real damage his paranoia caused. Ultimately, the consequences were clear. Trust is the only currency that matters in a real relationship. Thanks to Chloe's unexpected grace and Harper's immense capacity for forgiveness, Liam learned that true love requires absolute vulnerability, not elaborate tests. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey. If you enjoyed this story of love, wealth, and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. We want to know your thoughts. If you were in Harper's shoes, would you have forgiven Liam for lying about his wealth, or would the deception be a deal breaker? Let us know in the comments.